one and all, once again to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast where I'm your host, Jackson, and together, I guess, I'll say together, because you guys are still listening and watching, which is really cool. I read through a bunch of Tolkien's works other than Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and today's actually a really special chapter, I would say, because for this show, there's a lot of things that I would like to cover. One of them being the Fall of Numenor, which is I would say like a newer, quote unquote, a newer book that was released. I forget if it was like last year or this year. I kind of forget, but I think it was last year actually. And I decided that for this channel, I wanted to read that separately. So this will actually be the last Silmarillion episode, the last one that I'll be reading from this book specifically. I'm going to have another special segment, I suppose, another special episode revolving around the Silmarillion. Hopefully that'll be around the time that I do my my 1 year special, which is coming up in January. So hopefully I have enough kind of space there to create a couple fun episodes that are based around the Silmarillion. But yeah, this is the last chapter that I'll be reading from the Silmarillion itself as a full chapter, which is really exciting, actually. I did manage to actually go through the story of Quenta Silmarillion and Eärendil together, which is kind of and Val Quenta, sorry, yeah. But altogether, I feel like because there is Eärendil, there's Val Quenta, and there's Quenta Silmarillion. And Quenta Silmarillion is basically like the big chunk of the story. Ancalagon is more the Fall of Numenor, and then the last part of it is of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. So what I was thinking for this, and I won't ramble too long here, is that when I do eventually come to the Lord of the Rings, I know, right? That's far off, way far off. This is years in the making. But when I do start the Lord of the Rings, I would like to actually kind of cover of the Rings of Power in the Third Age from the Silmarillion. So maybe eventually in the far future I'll come back to this as a really long prologue and get a little glimpse of how old Sauron really is and how much of a force of evil he is. So that's kind of my reasoning of why this is going to be the last chapter, which is chapter 24 of the Voyage of Eärendil and the War of Wrath, which is I would say a very popular chapter among Tolkien nerds and those who love the Silmarillion. It's a very big chapter. So I think, and I'll probably add more stuff later, but I think with that kind of being said and introduced, I think it's time to go into the story itself so that you guys don't become bored. So, let's do it. Bright Eärendil was then lord of the people that dwelt nigh to Sirion's mouths, and he took to wife Elwing the Fair, and she bore to him Elrond and Elros, who were called the Half-Elven. Yet Eärendil could not rest, and his voyages about the shores of the Heatherlands eased not his unquiet. Two purposes grew in his heart, blended as one in longing for the wide sea. He sought to sail thereon, seeking after Tuor and Idril who returned not. And he thought to find perhaps the last shore, and bring ere he died the message of elves and men to the Valar in the west, that they should move their hearts to pity for the sorrows of Middle-earth. Now Eärendil became fast in friendship with Círdan the shipwright, who dwelt on the Isle of Valar, with those of his people who escaped from the sack of the havens of Berthambar and Eglarest. With the aid of Círdan, Eärendil built Vingilot. I would say Vingilot. The foam flower, fairest of the ships of song. Golden were its oars and white its timbers, hewn in the birch woods of Nimbrethil, and its sails were as the Argent moon. That's probably more accurate. In the Lay of Eärendil is many a thing sung of his adventures in the deep and in lands untrodden, and in many seas and in many isles. But Elwing was not with him, and she sat in sorrow by the mouths of Sirion. Eärendil found not Tuor nor Idril, nor came he ever on that journey to the shores of Valinor, defeated by shadows and enchantment, driven by repelling winds, until in longing for Elwing he returned homeward towards the coast of Beleriand. And his heart bade him haste, for a sudden fear had fallen on him out of dreams, and the winds that before he had striven Striven? I cannot talk today. Fitting for the last chapter. Before he had striven with might, not bear him back as swift as his desire. Now when first the tidings came to Maedhros that Elwing yet lived, and dwelt in possession of the Silmaril by the mouths of Sirion, he repenting of the deeds in Doriath withheld his hand. But in time the knowledge of their oath unfulfilled returned to torment him and his brothers, and gathering from their wandering hunting paths they sent messages to the havens of friendship, and yet of stern demand. Then Elwing and the people of Sirion would not yet yield the jewel which Beren had won and Luthien had worn, and for which Dior the Fair was slain. And least of all while Eärendil their lord was on the sea, for it seemed to them that in the Silmaril lay the healing and the blessing that had come upon their houses and their ships. And so there came to pass the last and cruelest of the slayings of elf by elf, and that was the third of the great wrongs achieved by the accursed oath. I'll do a little break here, a little quick break here, before I stutter a little bit too much in the story. So we get a little introduction, I guess, to Eärendil. Eärendil with Elwing, and that's obviously where Elrond comes from. So a lot of you people probably know Elrond and his importance, so he is very, very old. He was there, Gandalf. He was there many thousands of years ago, when he was still a little wee lad, under Eärendil and Elwing's care. Eärendil is this, so he's trying to find Tuor and Idril. He tries to get like the best of the best ships out to sea, but he never ends up finding them, and he keeps getting tossed around, the waters of Ulmo and the seas and whatnot. Very dangerous, very perilous. But eventually he kind of comes back, and he decides to pretty much stay where he is. But Maedhros reckons him havoc, and he wants the Silmaril. Obviously, a lot of people want the Silmaril, especially because Morgoth still has the other two, so it's a little bit of a problem. And that's kind of like where we're at. There's still strife in Beleriand, still. So, I think that's kind of what it is. Back to it here. For the sons of Feanor that yet lived came down suddenly upon the exiles of Gondolin and the remnant of Doriath and destroyed them. In that battle some of their people stood aside, and some few rebelled and were slain upon the other part, aiding Elwing against their own lords. For such was the sorrow and confusion in the hearts of the Eldar in those days. But Maedhros and Maglor won the day, though they alone remained thereafter of the sons of Feanor, for both Amrod and Amras were slain. Too late the ships of Círdan and Gil-galad, the High King, came hastening to the aid of the elves of Sirion, and Elwing was gone and her sons. Then such few of that people as did not perish in the assault joined themselves to Gil-galad, and went with him to Valar, and they told that Elros and Elrond were taken captive, but Elwing with the Silmaril upon her breast had cast herself into the sea. Thus Maedhros and Maglor gained not the jewel, but it was not lost, for Ulmo bore up Elwing out of the waves, and he gave her the likeness of a great white bird, and upon her breast there shone as a star the Silmaril, as she flew over the water to seek Eärendil, her beloved. On a time of night, Eärendil at the helm of his ship saw her come towards him, as a white cloud exceeding swift beneath the moon, as a star over the sea moving in a strange course, a pale flame on wings of storm. And it is sung that she fell from the air upon the timbers of Vingilot, in a swoon nigh upon death for the urgency of her speed, and Eärendil took her to his bosom. But in the morning with marveling eyes he beheld his wife in her own form beside him, with her hair upon his face, and she slept. Great was the sorrow of Eärendil and Elwing for the ruin of the havens of Sirion, and the captivity of their sons, and they feared that they would be slain, but it was not so. For Maglor took pity upon Elros and Elrond, and he cherished them, and love grew after between them, as little might be thought. But Maglor's heart was sick, and weary with the burden of the dreadful oath. Yet Eärendil saw no hope left in the lands of Middle-earth, and he turned again in despair and came not home, but sought back once more to Valinor with Elwing at his side. He stood now most often at the prow of Vingilot, and the Silmaril was bound upon his brow, and ever its light grew greater as they drew into the west. And the wise have said that it was by reason of the power and of that holy jewel that they came in time to waters that no vessels save those of the Teleri had known. And they came to the enchanted isles and escaped their enchantment. And they came to the shadowy seas and passed their shadows. And they looked upon Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle, but tarried not. And at the last they cast anchor in the bay of Eldamar. And the Teleri saw the coming of that ship out of the east, and they were amazed, gazing from afar upon the light of the Silmaril, and it was very great. Then Eärendil, first of living men, landed on the immortal shores, and he spoke there to Elwing and to those that were there with him. And they were 3 mariners who had sailed all the seas beside him. Falithar, Erelant, and Eärendil were their names. And Eärendil said to them, Here none but myself shall set foot, lest you fall under the wrath of the Valar. But that peril I will take on myself alone, for the sake of the 2 kindreds. And I'm going to stop right here because my turtle over there is wrecking havoc. So I'm going to pause it here really, really quick. Okay, alright. Now we're back. I apologize, guys, but my turtle, surprisingly, was making a lot of noise in the background, so I apologize for that. And we're just going to keep going with the story, as there is a lot of dialogue ahead. So my bad. And I think, well, actually, it is a time for a little quick break. Just to say that Eärendil, because he has the Silmaril with him, he's able to sail through all these like impassable places throughout the seas as a mortal man. Just because the other places were because of the like the immortal elves and whatnot, the children of Ilúvatar and whatnot. So he's kind of like the first one of like living mortal men to kind of go through here, and pretty much really close to the Undying Lands, which is really, really cool. So that's kind of where we're at right now as a quick little summary. Oh, this is funny because it's the last episode and tons of noise is happening. So we're going to go back into the story before I get distracted. But Elwing answered, Then would our paths be sundered forever, but all thy perils I will take on myself also. And she leaped into the white foam and ran towards him. But Eärendil was sorrowful, for he feared the anger of the lords of the west upon any of Middle-earth that should dare to pass the leaguer of Aman. And there they bade farewell to the companions of their voyage, and were taken from them forever. Then Eärendil said to Elwing, Await me here, for one only may bring the message that is my fate to bear. And he went up alone into the land, and came into the Calakiria, and it seemed to him empty and silent. For even as Morgoth and Ungoliant came in ages past, so now Eärendil had come at a time of festival, and well nigh all the elven folk were gone to Valamar, or were gathered in the halls of Manwë upon Tanaquetzal, and few were left to keep watch upon the walls of Tirion. But some there were who saw him from afar, and the great light that he bore, and they went in haste to Valamar. But Eärendil climbed the green hill of Tuna and found it bare, and he entered into the streets of Tirion, and they were empty. And his heart was heavy, for he feared that some evil had come even to the blessed realm. He walked into the deserted ways of Tirion, and the dust upon his raiment and his shoes was a dust of diamonds, and he shone and glistened as he climbed the long white stairs. But he called aloud in many tongues, both of elves and men, but there were none to answer him. Therefore he turned back at last towards the sea. But even as he took the shoreward road, one stood upon the hill and called to him in a great voice, crying, Hail, Eärendil, of mariners most renowned, the looked for that cometh at unawares, the longed for that cometh beyond hope. Hail, Eärendil, bearer of light before the sun and moon, splendor of the children of earth, star in the darkness, jewel in the sunset, radiant in the morning. That voice was the voice of Eönwë, herald of Manwë, and he came from Valamar, and summoned Eärendil to come before the powers of Arda. And Eärendil went into Valinor, into the halls of Valamar, and never again set foot upon the lands of men. Then the Valar took counsel together, and they summoned Ulmo from the deeps of the sea, and Eärendil stood before their faces, and delivered the errand of the 2 kindreds. Pardon he asked for the Noldor, and pity for their great sorrows, and mercy upon men and elves, and succor in their need, and his prayer was granted. It is told among the elves that after Eärendil had departed, seeking Elwing his wife, Mandos spoke concerning his fate, and he said, Shall mortal man step living upon the Undying Lands and yet live? But Ulmo said, For this he was born into the world, and say unto me, whether is he Eärendil Tuor's son of the line of Hador, or the son of Idril, Turgon's daughter, of the elven house of Finwë? And Mandos answered, Equally the Noldor, who went willfully into exile, may not return hither. But when all that was spoken, Manwë gave judgment, and he said, "In this matter the power of doom is given to me. The peril that he ventured for love of the two kindreds shall not fall upon Eärendil, nor shall it fall upon Elwing his wife, who entered into peril for love of him. But they shall not walk again ever among elves or men in the outer lands. And this is my decree concerning them. To Eärendil and to Elwing and to their sons shall be given leave each to choose freely to which kindred their fates shall be joined, and under which kindred they shall be judged." Now when Eärendil was long time gone, Elwing became lonely and afraid, and wandering by the margin of the sea, she came near to Ancalagon, where lay the Telerian fleets. There the Teleri befriended her, and they listened to her tales of Doriath and Gondolin, and the griefs of Beleriand, and they were filled with pity and wonder. And there Eärendil returning found her at the haven of the swans. But ere long they were summoned to Valimar, and there the decree of the elder king was declared to them. Then Eärendil said to Elwing, "Choose thou, for now I am weary of the world." And Elwing chose to be judged among the firstborn children of Iluvatar, because of Luthien. And for her sake Eärendil chose alike, though his heart was rather with the kindred of men and the people of his father. Then at the bidding of the Valar, Eonwë went to the shore of Aman, but the companions of Eärendil still remained, awaiting tidings. And he took a boat, and the 3 mariners were set therein, and the Valar drove them away into the east with a great wind. But they took Vingilot, and hollowed it, and bore it away through Valinor, in the uttermost rim of the world. And there it passed through the door of night, and lifted up even into the oceans of heaven. Now fair and marvelous was that vessel made, and it was filled with a wavering flame, pure and bright. And Eärendil the mariner sat at the helm, glistening with dust of elven gems, and the Silmarillion was bound upon his brow. Far he journeyed in that ship. Oops, sorry, my computer went blank. Far he journeyed in that ship, even into the starless voids, but most often was he seen at morning or at evening, glimmering in sunrise or sunset, as he came back to Valinor from voyages beyond the confines of the world. Alright, so a little bit of a break here. And that's crazy, because I actually kind of forgot. I forgot how much Eärendil really ups his own game up, like a significant amount. So, obviously, because of the whole curse of the Noldor, the exile of the Noldor, willfully defying the Valar, they are kind of strict about what Eärendil and Elwing choose, but eventually Elwing kind of gives her own final decision, and Eärendil always wants to stay with her. So, I mean, I would say that's a power couple right there. But yeah, it is really cool just to see the Valar again, especially with like Ulmo, Eonwë, and Manwë. Kind of like, even if it's just those 3, it's just nice to kind of see, or well, hear from the Valar again, because they aren't too relevant. I would say relevant in the story of the elves, only because I feel like it's because of the, exile of Noldor, and the whole story is about how elves are mischievous when it comes to a lot of things. But yeah, so that's kind of what happens. They choose to be judged from the elven side, and because of it, they have to pretty much stay in the area of Valinor. But Eärendil is so mighty and cool that he gets to go like beyond the world, which is crazy, and he gets to venture through the stars and the void, and it's crazy with his ship, the Vingilot. It is crazy. So, but it's just all the more why I really love this chapter. So now let's get back to it before I get more rambly. So let's get to it. On those journeys Elwing did not go, for she might not endure the cold and pathless voids, and she loved rather the earth and the sweet winds that blow on sea and hill. Therefore there was built for her a white tower northward upon the borders of the sundering seas, and thither at times all the sea-birds of the earth repaired. And it is said that Elwing learned the tongues of birds, who herself had once worn their shape, and they taught her the craft of flight, and her wings were of white and silver grey. And at times when Eärendil returning drew near again to Arda, she would fly to meet him, even as she had flown long ago, when she was rescued from the sea. Then the far-sighted among the elves that dwelt in the lonely isle would see her like a white bird, shining rose-stained in the sunset, as she soared in joy to greet the coming of Vingilot to haven. Now when first Vingilot was set to sail in the seas of heaven, It rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle-earth beheld it from afar and wondered, and they took it for a sign, and called it Gil Estel, the Star of High Hope. And when this new star was seen at evening, Maedhro spoke to Maglor his brother, and he said, Surely that is the Silmaril that shines now in the west? And Maglor answered, If it be truly the Silmaril which we saw cast into the sea, that rises again from the power of the Valar, then let us be glad, for its glory is now seen by many, and yet secure from all evil. Then the elves looked up and despaired no longer, but Morgoth was filled with doubt. Yet it is said that Morgoth looked not for the assault that came upon him from the west, for so great was his pride become, that he deemed that none would ever again come with open war against him. Moreover, he thought that he had forever estranged the Noldor from the lords of the west. In that content and that blissful realm, the Valar would heed no more his kingdom in the world without. For to him that is pitiless the deeds of pity are ever strange and beyond reckoning. But the host of the Valar prepared for battle, and beneath their white banners marched the Vanyar, the people of Ingwe, and those also of the Noldor who never departed from Valinor, whose leader was Finarfin, the son of Finwë. Few of the Teleri were willing to go forth to war, for they remembered the slaying at the Swanhaven, and the rape of their ships. But they hearkened to Elwing, who was the daughter of Dior Eluchil, and come of their own kindred, and they sent mariners enough to sail the ships that bore the host of Valinor east over the sea. Yet they stayed aboard their vessels, and none of them set foot upon the hither lands. Alright, quick break. I'll just make it really quick here. So, really cool stuff happens with Elwing. She actually just turns into literally like a half-bird person, but it's a really cool half-bird person, because she gets to greet Eärendil when he comes back from venturing in the stars, which is again, like really incredible for him to do. And because of it, they're like, oh, that has to be the Silmaril, that, you know, he gets to go further away, which is true. And it's like, well, it's a good thing, because that means Morgoth can't take it anymore, because it's literally guarded by the Valar. So, and it's crazy also that the Valar don't decide to take it, actually. Like, not like forcefully, but like it is part of the two trees of Valinor. So it's surprising that they didn't take the Silmaril, or at least ask for the Silmaril from Eärendil. But perhaps it's because it's like it protects them, that they can keep an eye out for it at all times. So it's kind of up and down with that stuff. So, and now they are preparing for war once more, just because they know that they have a very strong host and it's very unified. So I think now we can go back into the story once more. Of the march of the host of the Valar to the north of Middle-earth, little is said in any tale. For among them went none of those elves who had dwelt and suffered in the hitherlands, and who made the histories of those days that are still known. And tidings of these things they only learned long afterwards from their kinsfolk in Aman. But at the last the might of Valinor came up out of the west, and the challenge of the trumpets of Eönwë filled the sky, and Beleriand was ablaze with the glory of their arms, for the host of the Valar were arrayed in forms young and fair and terrible, and the mountains rang beneath their feet. The meeting of the hosts of the west and of the north is named the Great Battle, and the War of Wrath. There was marshalled the whole power of the throne of Morgoth, and had become great beyond count, so that Enfoglith could not contain it, and all the north was aflame in war. But it availed him not. The Balrogs were destroyed, save some few that fled and hid themselves in caverns inaccessible at the roots of the earth, and the uncounted legions of the orcs perished like straw in great fire, or were swept like shriveled leaves before a burning wind. Few remained to trouble the world for long years after, and such few as were left of the three houses of the Elf-friends, fathers of men, fought upon the part of the Valar, and they were avenged in those days for Beregond and Barahir, Galdor and Gundor, Huar and Hurin, and many others of their lords. But a great part of the sons of men, whether of the people of Uldor or others new come out of the east, marched with the enemy, and the elves do not forget it. Then seeing that his hosts were overthrown and his power dispersed, Morgoth quailed, and he dared not to come forth himself. But he loosed upon his foes the last desperate assault that he had prepared, and out of the pits of Angband there issued the winged dragons, that had not before been seen, and so sudden and ruinous was the onset of that dreadful fleet that the host of the Valar was driven back. For the coming of the dragons was with great thunder, and lightning, and a tempest of fire. But Eärendil came, shining with a white flame, and about Vingilot were gathered all the great birds of heaven, and Thorondor was their captain, and there was battle in the air all the day, and through a dark night of doubt. Before the rising of the sun, Eärendil slew Ancalagon the Black, the mightiest of the dragon host, and cast him from the sky, and he fell upon the towers of Thangorodrim, and they were broken in his ruin. Then the sun arose, and the host of the Valar prevailed, and well nigh all the dragons were destroyed, and all the pits of Morgoth were broken and unroofed, and the might of the Valar descended into the deeps of the earth. There Morgoth stood at last at bay, and yet unvaliant. He fled into the deepest of his mines, and sued for peace and pardon. But his feet were hewn from under him, and he was hurled upon his face. Then he was bound with a chain, Anganor, there you go, which he had worn aforetime, and his iron crown they bent into a collar for his neck, and his head was bowed upon his knees. And the 2 Silmarils which remained to Morgoth were taken from his crown, and they shone unsullied beneath the sky, and Eärendil took them and guarded them. Thus an end was made of the power of Angband in the north, and the evil realm was brought to naught. And out of the deep prisons a multitude of slaves came forth beyond all hope into the light of day, and they looked upon a world that was changed. For so great was the fury of those adversaries that the northern regions of the western world were rent asunder, and the sea roared in many great chasms, and there was confusion and great noise, and rivers perished or found new paths, and the valleys were upheaved, and the hills trod down, and Sirion was no more. So, we're going to do a little bit of a break here. Sorry, once again, there is just more things in the background, a lot of yelling and stuff. So if you guys heard my wife yelling, that's probably what it was. This is a crazy episode because so many things are happening in the background. It's like everything's telling me, no, not the last episode. So anyway, so we get the really cool battle between Morgoth's main forces of dragons, because if Balrogs were so easily defeated by Valar's host, he's like, oh, let's go send the dragons, and here you go. And at first it seemed like a really strong push from Morgoth, but obviously with the Valar's host, apparently they have no problem defeating dragons and Balrogs just like that. And it's crazy to see that Ancalagon is just like a sentence. It's just like, oh yeah, Eärendil defeated Ancalagon, and that's about it. Like he slew him. That was cool. Like, okay, like there's not much said about Ancalagon, but I know that it's a really famous dragon in Tolkien's I guess universe. It's only Arda, so it's like it's just the world. So it's kind of sad to see that there wasn't a lot of detail about Ancalagon, but it's still pretty cool. And then finally, Morgoth pretty much gets his crown taken away. The Silmarils are kept with Eärendil, who guards them, and his crown becomes a leash, which is really cool. And he's chained by the same chains that he was very long ago. And again, it's really crazy that it only took like one page for the Valar to just be like, you know what, maybe we should go fight him. And then they do, and they put him into captivity. Like, maybe you could have done that a while ago, but just me talking. So we're going to keep going before I, just keep rambling again. So here we go. Yep. Then Eärendil, as herald of the Elder King, summoned the elves of Beleriand to depart from Middle-earth. But Maegor and Maglar would not hearken, and they prepared, though now with weariness and loathing, an attempt in despair the fulfillment of their oath. For they would have given battle for the Silmarils, were they withheld, even against the victorious host of Valinor, even though they stood alone against all the world. And they sent a message, therefore, to Eärendil, bidding him yield up those those jewels, which of old Feanor their father made, and Morgoth stole from them. But Eärendil answered that the right to the work of their father, which the sons of Feanor formerly possessed, had now perished because of their many and merciless deeds, being blinded by their oath, and most of all because of their slaying of Dior and the assault upon the havens. The light of the Silmarils should go now into the west, whence it came in the beginning, and to Valinor must Maegor and Maglar return, and there abide the judgment of the Valar, By those decree alone would Eärendil yield the jewels from his charge. Then Maglor desired indeed to submit, for his heart was sorrowful, and he said, The oath says not that we may not bide our time, and it may be that in Valinor all shall be forgiven and forgot, and we shall come into our own in peace. But Maegos answered that if they returned to Aman, but the favor of the Valar were withheld from them, then their oath would still remain, but its fulfillment be beyond all hope. And he said, Who can tell to what dreadful doom we shall come, if we disobey the powers in their own land, or purpose ever to bring war again into their holy realm? Yet Maglor still held back, saying, If Manwë and Varda themselves deny the fulfillment of an oath to which we name them in witness, is it not made void? And Maegos answered, But how shall our voices reach to Iluvatar beyond the circles of the world? And by Iluvatar we swore in our madness, and called the everlasting darkness upon us. If we kept not our word, who shall release us? If none can release us, said Maglor, then indeed the everlasting darkness shall be our lot, whether we keep our oath or break it. But less evil shall we do in the breaking. Yet he yielded at last to the will of Maegos, and they took counsel together how they should lay hands on the Silmarils. And they disguised themselves, and came in the night into the camp of Eärendil, and crept into the place where the Silmarils were guarded. And they slew the guards, and laid hands on the jewels. Then all the camp was raised against them, and they prepared to die, defending themselves until the last. But Eärendil would not permit the slaying of the sons of Feanor, and departing unfought, they fled far away. Each of them took to himself a Silmaril, for they said, Since one is lost to us, and but two remain, and we two alone of our brothers, so it is plain that fate would have us share the heirlooms of our father. But the jewel burned the hand of Maegos in pain unbearable, and he perceived that it was Eärendil had said, and that his right thereto had become void, and that the oath was vain. And being in anguish and despair, he cast himself into a gaping chasm, filled with fire, and so ended. And the Silmaril that he bore was taken into the bosom of the earth. And it is told of Maglor that he could not endure the pain with which the Silmaril tormented him, and he cast it at last into the sea, and thereafter he wandered ever upon the shores, singing in pain and regret beside the waves. For Maglor was mighty among the singers of old, named only after Daeron of Doriath, but he came never back among the people of the elves. And thus it came to pass that the Silmarils found their long homes, one in the airs of heaven, and one in the fires of the heart of the world, and one in the deep waters. Alright, so we're going to do one more break before we finish up the chapter and the book. So, we get one more attempt of stealing the Silmarils, which they kind of succeed at, Maegos and Maglor. This is why Maglor is, I would consider him to be a small villain of the story, just because the Silmaril is like an ever-consuming lust toward that jewel. So even when Eärendil and the Valar are just like, no, we're bringing it back to Valinor so that nobody else can have it, they still try to steal it, and because of it, Eärendil is like, sure, go ahead, just take them, go ahead, see what it does, and this is what happens. Maegos is like, well, you know what, this is void eternal, pretty much eternal darkness, and he pretty much kind of kills himself as he kind of casts himself over into a chasm filled with fire, which is horrifying. And then Maglor pretty much chucks his Silmaril into the sea and pretty much just becomes, I don't even know, I wouldn't say like depressed, but it is part of it. He's just not himself at all the whole rest of his life, which is in itself is a terrible curse, just losing yourself even when the jewel is lost at sea. So all the Silmarils kind of find their own place. So with that kind of being said, let's this is kind of cool because look at this, we're right on the oh man, it's really bright actually. There we go. So we are on the last pages that I'll be reading, so here we go. Let's do it. See how many times I mess up the words. Alright, here we go. In those days there was a great building of ships upon the shores of the western sea, and thence in many fleet the Eldar set sail into the west, and came never back to the lands of weeping and of war. And the Vanir returned beneath their white banners, and were borne in triumph to Valinor. But their joy in victory was diminished, for they returned without the Silmarils from Morgoth's crown, and they knew that those jewels could not be found or brought together again unless the world be broken and remade. And when they came into the west, the elves of Beleriand dwelt upon Tol Eressëa, the lonely isle that looks both west and east, whence they might come even to Valinor. They were admitted again to the love of Manwë, and the pardon of the Valar, and the Teleri forgave their ancient grief, and the curse was laid to rest. Yet not all the Eldaldier were willing to forsake the Hitherlands, where they had long suffered and long dwelt, and some lingered many an age in Middle-earth. Among those were Círdan the Shipwright, and Celeborn of Doriath, with Galadriel his wife, who alone remained of those who led the Noldor to exile in Beleriand. In Middle-earth dwelt also Gil-galad the High King, and with him was Elrond, half-elven, who chose, as was granted to him, to be numbered among the Eldar. But Elros his brother chose to abide with men. And from those brethren alone has come among men the blood of the firstborn, and a strain of the spirits divine that were before Arda. For they were the sons of Elwing, Dior's daughter, Lúthien's son, child of Thingol and Melian. And Eärendil their father was the son of Idril Celebrimbor, Turgon's daughter of Gondolin. But Morgoth himself the Valar thrust through the door of night beyond the walls of the world, into the timeless void. And a guard is set ever on those walls, and Eärendil keeps watch upon the ramparts of the sky. Yet the lies that Melkor, the mighty and accursed, Morgoth Boglir, the power of terror and of hate, sowed in the hearts of elves and men, are a seed that does not die, and cannot be destroyed. And ever and anon it sprouts anew, and will bear dark fruit even until the latest days. Here ends the Silmarillion. If it has passed from the high and the beautiful to darkness and ruin, that was of old the fate of Arda marred. And if any change shall come and the marring be amended, Manwë and Varda may know, but they have not revealed it, and it is not declared in the dooms of Mondos. And that's the end of the Silmarillion. That's the end of Quenta Silmarillion, I suppose, I should say. Because this next, I guess the next segment in the book that I have here, let's see here, is, can you guys see it, maybe? I don't know, Ancalagon, which is the downfall of Númenor. And like I said earlier, I wanted to choose the downfall of Númenor because I have the book, The Fall of Númenor, and that kind of goes into detail. And if anything, I can always start off with the chapter itself when I get to The Fall of Númenor, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing, just as a two-part introduction of what The Fall of Númenor is all about, which is kind of obvious, but it kind of, leaks into, Sauron's power and whatnot. But yeah, so actually, as another quick, very last summary of the Silmarillion is that the elves, Vanyar, there you go. They return to Valinor, but not in complete victory because of the Silmarils, but they do know that Morgoth is in the timeless void, forever put away because of everything that he's done, but the seeds of Melkor, the seeds of Morgoth have always been kind of sowed into the earth, so there will always be another villain, another bad guy that just shows up. And obviously it's seen from Morgoth to Sauron, and unfortunately there wasn't, another sequel spin. I mean, there was that Tolkien started it and then he never finished it. I think it was like The New Shadow or something like that. But pretty much evil is always going to come back, but there is always going to be something to defend the darkness, which is really cool. And it's seen that Eärendil pretty much keeps watch of Morgoth's imprisonment in timeless void. There you go. So yeah, wow, guys, this is incredible. The Silmarillion is now done, at least on my end, from reading each chapter. Hopefully you guys kind of understand what kind of like how I'm doing the process, because after we were done, with the Silmarillion, I will be going back into a few stories, such as this one, which is Beren and Lúthien. It's kind of hard to try to keep the covers up here. So I will be reading Beren and Lúthien, also the Children of Húrin, also that one as well. Good old Fall of Gondolin, which is always a fun tale. And last but not least, because of what I've been saying this whole time, the Fall of Numenor. So there are these 4 separate books that I will be going into with the expansion of the Silmarillion. There's also a lot of histories of Middle-earth. As you guys can see, I have a lot of the histories of Middle-earth, so so I'm still kind of debating whether I want to do a bunch of Tolkien short stories, I consider short stories, or just to continue the Silmarillion stories, based around this, because I started it and whatnot. Just let me know if you guys want to at the end of this video, if you guys have ever really made it to the end of the video. Who knows? Just let me know if you guys want me to continue the Silmarillion based stories like I just showed you, the 4 books that I have, or to kind of go off a little bit on the short stories and then come back. Otherwise, I'll probably just plan it out myself, because this is my personal project and whatnot. You guys already kind of know that. So this is incredible that I finished the Silmarillion in a year. Incredible. I guess I can say that I finished the story. I suppose I read the book in a year, so I'm very proud in that way. Now, I do have some ideas for the Silmarillion, like as a whole, as like a review of the whole book, but that will be like a separate episode, and whether it's after this one or if it's on my year review, or not review, my year anniversary, I guess it's kind of up to me to plan that out and whatnot. But I'm so glad that you guys came with me through this journey. It's really, really cool. I'm glad that I got a few subs. That's really cool. And some listens and some watches and views, I should say, which is incredible. And yeah, I just didn't think I'd get this far, which is just really awesome. I just can't find the words for it. So I will be continuing this project as long as I can, which is going to be a long time, most likely. And I hope that a lot of you are going to be sticking around for the ride. Hopefully I'll be doing a little better with mic situations or audio effects or cameras or anything like that. I hope that I kind of up my game next year, but we'll see about that, because that's another project that I gotta add to myself. So also, of course, as always, I gotta plug my book. Check out The Lands of Ordia, Power of Heaven. It is available on Amazon Publishing. As always, as I've told you guys a lot of times, I've worked very, very, very hard on this book. A lot of history, a lot of lore, and I'm trying my best to keep up with creating my language, but it's also very hard because it's a whole nother language. So just snag a copy if you can, because I would greatly appreciate it. So now, for the last time for the Silmarillion, still stay tuned for another episode. And may the light of Elbreth be with you all. Farewell!